All right. The COVID-19 continues to rattle up in close to 40 states. We've had some of the highest numbers on a national level since we started this thing. President Trump says this about those numbers in Cut 5 here.
Now we have tested almost 40 million people. By so doing, we show cases, 99% of which are totally harmless.
He's got a lot of blowback for that. Dr. Daniel Havlichek is on the line with us right now, Division of Infectious Disease out of Michigan State University. Dr. Havlichek, good to have you back with us.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
So you sound a little tentative about that. Believe me, you're glad to be
here.
Well,
I know the next question that's coming.
Well, okay, what's the next question that's coming?
How right is Trump?
Okay, that's a good question since you asked it. How right is the president?
Well, I think he's not correct in terms of his numbers. I think he's obviously overestimating the fact that a lot of people will not get sick from this. We don't really have good numbers in terms of, of all the people who are positive, what percent are going to go on to become ill or sick. But his number is, I think, quite low and probably going to prove out to be wrong.
Well, I think the best defense I saw of this by someone on his staff was that if you go for the 330 million population in America, then 99% of the people will end up being unharmed by it by the time it was some kind of convoluted way of looking at it. I think we can all agree that, in fact, in point of fact, the numbers tend to suggest that we're sort of at a 9 or 10% mortality rate versus if you go by the number of people who are tested and then the number of people who have died. I think it's up around there. Is that high, or is that proving to be normal, or should you not even connect those two numbers?
Well, I don't think you should necessarily draw a straight line between those two numbers. I think the age-related process is really important here. Anybody over the age of 50 has a much higher chance of dying with this as opposed to anybody under the age of 50. That seems to be kind of a break point. And so, we want to obviously protect everybody. And so young people who maybe are in college, which here at Michigan State we have a lot of that going on, they take it to their families. They'll take it to their grandparents, their parents, and then their parents are very susceptible to getting severely sick, and some will die.
Right. I want to correct my numbers here because I pulled up the latest on Worldometers. So it's more like 4%.
Yeah.
If you take the test numbers, there have been 3 million cases now in the United States, a little over, and 132,000 deaths. So I can even do the math on that. That's about 4%. So not the alarming 9 or 10%, and that's good. Although in the state of Michigan, it tends to be closer to that, which is weird for some reason. One thing I wanted to ask you about the testing, and then I want to ask you about young people who you brought up. So we say, well, we've had 40 million tests, or President Trump says we've tested 40 million people. That's not the same thing, is it? Because there are people who are getting tested like athletes, 10, 12, 15, 20 times. The president himself gets tested probably on a daily basis. So the number of tests isn't necessarily the number of people, right? You can have one person who could have been tested. You talk about medical workers who have to get tested all the time. You have to. There's got to be some kind of dividing factor by that. If we've got 40 million tests, that doesn't mean 40 million people. Maybe it means more like 20 million people.
No, absolutely. Well, I don't know what the absolute number would be, but you're 100% correct. Tests are just tests, and one person could be tested 10 times, and that's 10 tests, but it's only one person still. So, it is important for the state of Michigan to keep track of this. I can't obviously get the numbers or the data, and I'm sure the president doesn't have the numbers or the data either. But some people are charged with doing that, and they should follow this, and they can give us, numbers in terms of positive tests and numbers in terms of positive people.
Right.
And this is just something I don't have.
Right. Because we're going to get to a point where we'll have have about 100 million tests, and we'll still only have, tested for, 8% of the population. So it's not going to, the two aren't going to jive. All right, let me switch over to young people. This is a very current concern. Young people are now dominating the numbers, and there seems to be a pervasive sense amongst the young people especially that, well, what's the big deal? We're young. It can't hurt us. What's the truth about COVID-19 and its effects on young people once they get it?
I will be honest. I think that most young people, and I would actually put that into the less than 40 years old group, will have mild to moderate symptoms. Some will get quite sick, but that will be the minority of them. So the main issue is they're going to transmit to other people, whether they are in their family, whether it's in the store, whether it's in, whatever, at a party over 4th of July. That makes us all very nervous. But you have to just hope that they follow the social distancing and the masks and everything turns out okay. But we'll see.
All right, continuing our conversation with Dr. Daniel Havlichek, Division of Infectious Disease at Michigan State University. We're talking about young people and coronavirus. And as you pointed out, most of them are not going to die from this. However, we are hearing about cases of a lot of hospitalization, it seems, of people in their 20s and 30s. Is that a byproduct of simply the increased numbers, or is it while not killing them, leveling some of them to the point that they need to be hospitalized?
That's a good question. I have not seen numbers where there's been a lot of people that age, say 20, 30-year-olds, being hospitalized compared to the number that are actually infected. So I really don't feel I can comment about that. We haven't seen very many people here that are that age in our hospital. So from my personal experience, I haven't seen that.
Yeah, there is evidence in other states for sure of this. Georgia just being one of them.
Okay.
And there are numerous stories about them taking up the hospital beds. And when you're starting to hear in Texas and in Houston and in San Antonio, you're starting to hear about hospitals running into the problem of running out of beds. In fact, we have a cut here from Kenny Cut 13, Dr. Jeff Develope, San Antonio Methodist Hospital. Listen to what he had to say.
The last few weeks has just been overwhelming, is how I would describe it. There's been more and more patients than we really know what to do with. The patients are getting younger, and they're more sick.
How much younger?
It's gone from, probably 50s and 60s for the first wave to, I've lost track of how many people in their 20s.
So, that's just one case in point and this is hospital cases. He's not talking about positive tests. He's talking about people taking up hospital beds. I have read where the disease has mutated, which is a common thing for viruses of this kind, mutated into something not more potent, but quicker spreading. Can you elaborate on that?
Again, I think this is something that is kind of a work in progress. Everybody's trying to figure out why it spreads, how it spreads, the lethality, all of that stuff. I think we're learning more about the super spreaders and how people, will get it at a restaurant or a bonfire or something like that, and 10, 20, 30 people can come down with it. So it's clearly cluster related, and I don't know if that's a mutation of the virus. My guess is not so much, since it's happening all around the country. I mean, it wouldn't mutate all over the country all at the same time. So my analysis of it would be there's less social distancing in some of these other states, and that there's just more spread that way as opposed to a mutation of the virus. If a virus mutates, it tends to mutate lots of different ways, right? It can go bad and spread more, or it could actually mutate the other way and spread less.
Right.
So, a mutation isn't unidirectional. So I think that it's the spread in the United States is not necessarily related to a mutation, but that would that needs to be confirmed genetically.
Hey, Doctor, I did want to ask you, I know that a lot of people are saying the death rate is down, but the hospitalizations are going up and the infections are going up. Is that something that in a couple of weeks those hospitalizations will turn into deaths necessarily? Do the two have any correlation, or is it just, it depends?
Well, I think a couple of things are happening. One is we're learning how to handle it in the hospital much better. So, we're doing steroids, we're doing prone ventilation, there's remdesivir that's out there. There was really the interesting study from Henry Ford that just got reported over the weekend that I think is, we're taking maybe another look at hydroxychloroquine, although that has to be looked at more seriously before we jump back to hydroxychloroquine. So we're doing a little better, I think, in the hospital. So that, I think, would drive the death rate down. So I think that's, one kind of part of it.
Let me ask you about outdoors. There's a sense as the hot weather has come upon us and as outdoor activities have all been opened up now, that as long as you're outdoors, you're pretty much okay. And the notion, of course, even you see in restaurants that are being closed down or bars that are being closed down, they're allowing the decks to remain open. How safe or unsafe is the outdoors in and of itself? If you just say, well, I'm outdoors, so therefore I don't need to be that far apart, or I don't need to limit the length of my conversations, or I can sing outside because the wind is going to blow the germs away. Tell us about how much of protection the outdoors really is.
Yeah, and I think it is helpful, but it's, again, not an all or none situation. You can be, I think, more safe outdoors than you will be indoors, and for a variety of reasons. The cough or I shouldn't be coughing. Number one, if you're sick, stay home, okay? Right. But any droplet spread or aerosol spread is going to be diffused much easier outside. So the probability that you would acquire it from somebody, next to you would be less. I think the wind, if it blows, is going to disperse it even more. The sunlight can be damaging to viruses, so hopefully the sunlight would hurt it as well. And it's not as loud. I do think this issue where people are in bars and it's really noisy and you have to talk really loud almost right next to somebody to be heard is part of the reason why it spreads in bars a lot, especially college bars. Right. I wasn't at the one here in East Lansing, but I've been to plenty of college bars in my life, and I know they get pretty noisy. And so, the music and everything like that on the indoor side where you have to really almost yell at the person next to you to be heard is just going to facilitate spread of virus. So that's why outside I do think is more safe than inside.
Right, but just to put a pin on it, if you're sitting at a table with, 6, 7 people, a round table, and you're all leaning in over your dinners, and you're outside on the deck, and one of the people at the table has it, and you're just doing normal conversation, but you're not 6 feet apart. You're like what normal chairs are apart. You're going to get it, right? I mean, if you're staying there for 2-3 hours like people do over tables, you're not protected simply because you're sitting at a table outside as opposed to inside.
No, that's absolutely correct. You would need to maintain the social distancing as much as possible. The 6 feet seems to be a nice number. The, close conversations, all those kind of things, they need to be monitored. But you're 100% correct. You could get it, and it does happen. How probable it is, and how much it's going to happen, like I say, I think would be less if you're outside than if you were inside with the air not being circulated as much and those kind of things. Right. Mm-hmm. It's just kind of I think the common sense approach to it.
Well, hasn't been a whole lot of common sense on some people's parts, but we'll hope for that. Dr. Daniel Havlichek, thank you for coming on with us and giving us so much time.
No problem. And I will give a plug to the FIA. It's a great place.
Yeah, it's a fantastic place.